need to switch.
Yes, this is the team. Let's make it energetic, guys. All right. Great, let's go. Exactly. It's kind of appropriate. Actually, I'll just first say my name is Catherine Atkin, and I'm from the Stanford Codex. And I'm really excited to be here today because it's my two favorite organizations, the UNFCCC UGIH Innovation Hub and the World Green Economy Organization. So, this is an honor. I'm very excited to have and to have old friends and new friends up here today, and to have this very important conversation. I look forward to lively dialogue and hopefully to push ourselves forward as we think about this important topic, which, as you know, is pathways for climate-aligned sustainable finance. I'm going to quickly just name the panelists, and then we're just going to jump in because we have a star-studded cast of 5 people. You can barely fit on this stage right now. So first we have Wes Geisenberger, VP for Sustainability and ESG for the Hedera Foundation. Marcelo Freire, CEO of Sigma Institute. Then we have Nitin Arora, lead for Stakeholders Interaction Unit and the Global Innovation Hub. Nobody at the UNFCCC just does one job, okay? So thanks for being here with us, Nitin. And then we have Neha Sharma, the Results, Impact, and Knowledge Unit Lead for the World Bank Adaptation Fund. And last but not least, Alain Boulevard Alipour, the Director of the Green Climate Fund. So truly a marquee group here. So, okay, so I'm just gonna ask you all an opening question that combines a couple things. One is, for those in the audience and certainly those on the panel, we know we've been having this innovative climate finance conversation for a long time. So when you introduce yourself, please share kind of how that's evolved, and more importantly, kind of situated in your own work, and where are you seeing the bright spots? Like where in your work do you think we're making progress in addressing both the need for climate mitigation, adaptation, building the resilience and strong economies across the world, especially low and middle income countries? So with that, I'm going to start with Wes Geisenberger.
Thank you, Catherine, and I really appreciate the UNFCCC and World Green Economy Organization for having me. For those who don't know Hedera and the Hedera Foundation, historically we're a grant-giving organization, but we grow the economy specifically around sustainable finance on the Hedera network. And one of the things we're spending a lot of time, money, and effort on this year, and one of the most exciting things we see the opportunity for, is innovating around financial integrity in climate finance. And the difference is with some of the tools we work on in public ledgers or blockchains, which Hedera is a consortium governed by companies across industries and geographies, is the ability to track funds, whether it's from a capital markets instrument like a bond or another type of fund, to specific projects, to specific outcomes in the context of a methodology. And what that allows us to do is to take every single role, actor, stakeholder, and understand what they're attesting to in the context of that methodology to the unit of outcome. So if we have a water rights outcome, some other type of mitigation or adaptation outcome, even beyond carbon credits and carbon markets, or it could be emissions reductions in a value chain, what we're able to see is that dollars correlated to the impact, not just use of funds, vendors, stakeholder interactions, or the communities. We're actually able to track the funds and understand what percent went to in-kind versus cash contributions versus operational cost. And our goal is to get to a level of efficiency where we can click one button from one instrument and understand the climate finance to the community, to the stakeholders involved, and understand the true impact and how much funds are going to communities. It allows us to get to a point of understanding what does a just transition look like, who's benefiting. Is it a consultant from a global north country using the dollars from an instrument, or is it truly the communities that need access to finance, that need access to the impact that's actually going to drive sustainable development. That's what we see as most exciting right now, but it's built on a library of methodologies that we've been building for 5 years. And now is the time that we're seeing these instruments start to come onto public ledgers, tying into the capital markets, tying into the institutional stakeholders. And it's certainly the thing that we've been working towards and are excited to work on for the next 5 years.
Fantastic. Thank you for talking about the importance of data and next-gen technologies. Marcelo, Sigma Institute, what are you up to and how are you, what part of this value chain challenge are you solving?
Well, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Everybody excited? Woohoo! We're here today. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks, everybody. Manali. I'm pretty much involved with Sigma Institute. The only reason I'm the president of Sigma Institute is because of this guy, to be honest, because he got me involved in this work with the Innovation Hub, and it's been a passion work. We've been developing the agenda in Brazil together, doing a lot of good things, and I just sit on the chair of Sigma Institute to deal with the bureaucracy side, because like it's the way to develop the agenda in Brazil. You need like to have the formal structure, the regulatory, economic code, this kind of things. You know, not just Barcelo stamp. So Juliana is the vice president of Sigma Institute, and she's been. I'm gonna answer you the two questions that you said. Okay, so I think Sigma, it's been helping to develop the Innovation Hub agenda in Brazil. It's developing super nice. We're super glad. And then at the same time, we noticed that we still have a lot of opportunities and some issues in Brazil that are like crazy. They're not developing, but sometimes you just don't find the proper finance for them. So one of the main issues that we are dealing with, what is kind of a catastrophe in Brazil, is the waste management. So we're still burying like huge amount of plastic, for example, just because it's like missing just a small penny finance access. Like the business is almost good by itself, most of the time, but we're just missing a little bit, you know. So for Brazil, I'm recalling like this example, because it's so frustrating to see tons and tons and tons and tons of plastic every day going to the ground, you know. And then Juliana developed some projects like this, where she brought like the difference to the balance, and then you have economic feasibility, you know. And then once you advance it and you break through the barrier, then you have a good business, you know. Then you have resource that you're putting on the ground. So I think this for me is like outrageous agenda. Like it's ridiculous to be burying plastic.
Thank you, Catherine, for inviting me to be part of this panel. And I'm also very happy that we are co-hosting this panel along with WGO for a very important topic. With respect to your question, I think that in terms of the progress, what we have seen in recent years is that I think in the conversation related to climate finance, we noticed that a few years ago, private sector was missing in the conversation. I mean, like there were very few private players who were part of the discussions earlier, which is something that has been changing both at the COP and other UN events and platforms. And that's exactly what we are doing at Innovation Hub, which was a Secretariat's initiative of, UNFCCC Secretariat initiated this project at COP26 in Glasgow. And the objective of this initiative is to engage more and more non-party stakeholders, including private sector, and bring them into this important conversation. Because we know that, I mean, like, just relying on public finance is not enough. We need to mobilize private capital to the conversation, and that can only happen when we have private players in these discussions. Just last week before, I mean, I'm losing count of the weeks now, The week before, we were in Rio, organized our first global innovation forum, cooperation with the state government of Rio, and Marcelo helped us a lot in organizing this event. We were in a panel where, there were some VC, private VC players, and we were having this conversation on unlocking private capital for climate mitigation and adaptation. And he asked a very relevant question in the room: how many, private investors are there? There were very few, of course. And this is something which we are trying to change now through our several initiatives, and make sure that we have private finance on the table. People are there on the table to discuss this important issue, and that's the progress we are trying. And we are not there yet, of course. We need to do a lot, but I think with our concerted efforts, we will be able to push this agenda of private finance in all our conversations.
Thank you, Nitin. So important to understand. Like, we have to make change at sort of the multi-stakeholder level, and the power of UNFCCC is unending when it comes to that. And we just have to build the other piece of the stack. So, Neha, can you share with us your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for having me here to speak today. Just for those who might not know the Adaptation Fund provides grant funding to developing countries. We have over 200 projects in 100 countries, and we're a $1.5 billion fund. The Adaptation Fund was set up to receive the share of proceeds from the CDM under the Kyoto Protocol. Once that market collapsed, we're now meant to receive the share of proceeds under Article 6.4. And of course, that's not operational yet, but once it becomes operational. And I share this to say that the Adaptation Fund was set up in an innovative way, because it was really going to use finances generated from mitigation for adaptation purposes. So it was really set up with the lens of innovative financing. However, as we know, it hasn't quite panned out the way we had hoped or planned, and it now relies on voluntary contributions from contributor governments. And for the last few years, we haven't received our floor target being set up by our board. So we're quite interested in seeing how else we could, to keep the pressure on developed countries, but also see what other sources of finance. We know under Article 6.2, we're encouraging voluntary contributions to the Adaptation Fund. There have been a few early deals. The 6.2 is also just taking off, so that's also not a reliable source of finance at the moment. But our observation from the Adaptation Fund when it comes to innovation is that the innovation in projects is far outpacing the innovation in finance. And we're seeing a lot of innovations coming bottom up on adaptation projects. We have, for example, parametric insurance in Bhutan that we're funding. We have a special innovation window that funds single country projects, regional projects. In fact, under our innovation window, we can provide financing to non-accredited entities through aggregator programs run by multilateral agencies. And we're seeing a lot of interesting projects come up. For example, we have portable dams in Burundi and Uganda. We have community-based desalination in Antigua and Barbuda. But I think the main point I want to say is that the innovation in projects is far outpacing the innovation in finance.
All right, well, Ellen, you have the unenviable task of telling us about your work. You can't solve everybody's problems. So tell us what you are doing, and what's exciting. Like, who's moving forward in this space, and what should we be doing more of?
Yeah, 2 minutes, right? Thank you. Green Climate Fund, maybe a few words about the Green Climate Funds. As of today, I think we're the largest multilateral climate funds, portfolio of 19 billion, co-mobilizing 60 billion more, so overall almost 80 billion. More than 200 projects under 30 countries. We're covering both adaptation and mitigation with a balance of 50-50, yeah? And within the adaptation part, we have a strong focus on vulnerable countries. So as of today, 65% of the adaptation part is going to Africa, Seas, and LDC, which is a very strong focus for us, 65%. Now, what is interesting is that we have also a very broad network of partners. We're working with 160 implementing entities, going from the big ones like the World Bank, the UN agencies, all the MDBs, of course, but also down to the ground with local NGOs, local development banks, and also with all kind of private sector partners. Could be like major banks, but also private equity partners or VC. So it's a very broad scale and range of partners. And the other important things is the range of instruments that we can deploy. If you look at the portfolio of the 19 billion, we're like 45% in grants, ready to support the most vulnerables. About 40% concessional loans, highly concessionals, but we also deliver like 12% equity. 12% equity is huge. This is what the EBRD will do. And in the 12% equity, we do 1/3 in LDCs, which actually nobody is doing. Because the idea behind that is to bring basically our partners, like MDBs or private sector, in geographies and segments where they normally will never go. Yeah, that's really like at the core of the GC. Now, if you look at the figures, this is just a drop in the ocean. I mean, I was talking about this 80 billion overall, but if you look at the NCQG targets, I mean, we are very far off what we should deliver. And this is where actually, in the end, we need to leverage the private sector, of course, and also the domestic resources, which are basically looking at where we want to focus on. On the private sector, I mean, a lot of innovation there. I mean, you know about the de-risking instruments. You've heard about all of these. A good example for us was the Gaia platform. Gaia platform is somewhere where the GCA put 150 million, so 150 million equity, so quite a big ticket, to leverage 1.5 billion overall from private sector with MUFG, FinDev Canada. Quite a successful platform. As of today, deployed in 19 countries. They're of 25% vulnerable, 70% adaptation. Can you imagine that? I mean, 10 years ago, the private sector never went to adaptation, never. And thanks to this kind of instrument, you are able to attract them massively in segments where they were never going before. So we're taking the first loss. This is typical innovation. Also, I think to attract the private sector is market creation. Think about again, I mean, 10 years ago, bringing the private sector to the nature-based solutions was impossible. Now we just launched with Mirova, a private equity fund, quite famous, actually a fund that they are financing 400 million. We're taking in 20% first loss equity to bring basically all the partners to the forest management. Forestry, as you know, is a big topic. Again, this is something where the private sector will never go. Last point on the private sector, and I think you should have an eye on that, is the GEMS database that was just released. The Global Emerging Market Risk Database. I don't know if you heard about this one. This was released like 2-3 weeks ago. This is a database that actually is tracking all the default rate of all the MDBs and the PDBs over the last 20 years. And what you see is that investing in emerging developing economy is not riskier than investing in developed economy. So for the private sector, it's really an eye-opening that they can go there and they don't necessarily need to price higher risk. So I encourage you to look at that. A last point, sorry for being a bit long, is about the domestic resource mobilization. We're talking a lot about like the private sector, but the core of the money is coming at the domestic level. Yeah? And we are actually very supportive of the Financing Common Initiative that is like promoted almost everywhere. You may have been in South Africa in February for that, where basically you are gathering all the local players, about like 400 players. First, they have the money. They have an overall balance sheet altogether of 20 billion. 20 trillion, sorry, 20 trillion. So this is where the big money is. This is also people who have the local knowledge. There are all the PDBs there, all the local development bank. So this is also the idea that we want to work much more with the local player and to support them much more. Good example there that we have been launching is the Innovative Partnerships, the country platform. We just launched 17 country platforms on Saturday to work more of the country, to work more of the local players. I mean, the big one was launched in Brazil a year ago with BNDES at the core, and we want to do more of that. And the last point on the domestic level is we have to understand that climate is just one of the topics among many, many other crises that the country are facing. So we are trying to develop instruments that are tackling several crises. A good example is the double vulnerability between climate and debt. And we are working on debt swap. We deployed one in Barbados recently to be able to tackle both the debt issue and both the climate issue. And I think we'll need much more of that. Thank you.
Okay, well, I would say that was a kind of sunny presentation, and it was exciting to hear the levels on which you see progress being made. And I'd love to open this up to others on the panel, sort of what about what Alan said really resonates with what you're doing? I was thinking about you, Neha. You've talked about the use of data to understand kind of the evidence base, and I think we're hearing that, it's very powerful to be able to actually look at investment to understand where we're lowering the cost of capital, where the green premium is required, where it's not. Any thoughts, maybe starting with you on this?
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for those remarks. It was quite interesting to hear all the things that the GCF is innovating with in terms of mechanisms of finance. And one of the things you said was the availability of information on the risks. And here I'd say, mitigation has a 20-year advantage over adaptation in understanding the benefits and the risks. So there's a lot of data measurement, assessment, innovation that's required in adaptation, especially given the type of co-benefits that it has, both economic and non-economic. And the actual measurement of economic benefits is quite recent. The estimates that we have of each dollar invested in adaptation leading to $10 to $14 in economic gains, and this includes avoided losses, but also includes direct and indirect economic gains, is quite recent. These numbers are over the last 3 to 5 years. So there's a long way to go in understanding how to measure the benefits coming from adaptation, and these are just the economic ones. There's a lot of social cohesion, gender empowerment, community empowerment that are the way that we currently measure development and progress are difficult to quantify. So there's just a lot of measurement work that needs to be done, evidence that needs to be generated on the benefits of adaptation projects. And my hope is that generating more of that evidence will also draw more finance to it, including from the private sector. We're actually developing a scale-up framework at the moment between the Adaptation Fund and the GCF. And what we're looking at is measuring this, or assessing the successful projects that are under the Adaptation Fund, and rating them for scale up by the GCF. And we've had a lot of conversations among the climate funds, but particularly with the Green Climate Fund, on how should we measure success. Like, what is a metric that we're going to use to identify which projects are ready for scale up? And how are we going to do this, not just relying on ODA? Because as we know, global ODA is shrinking, so we need to look at other forms of finance. So it's been interesting to have that conversation. And the metric that we're currently developing includes, of course, whether the project is meeting its objectives, but it includes things like social inclusion. It includes whether there's a demand for scale. And here I think leadership at the country level matters a lot. Country platforms are a great way to demonstrate that leadership. So we're trying to assess whether there's demand from the country, whether the project was successful, whether there's social inclusion that was really core to the success of the project, and whether extending the project will actually lead to both the breadth and the depth of impact being increased. So breadth in terms of more beneficiaries, more regions, or more sectors, but depth in terms of the capacity that's being built that will be sustained over a period of time. So I just wanted to say that there's a lot of measurement and evidence work that needs to be done to draw more finance into adaptation.
Fantastic. Great to hear those insights. And Wes, I'm going to bring you in because talking about data and impact, I mean, you are working with the Hedera Foundation, and both on the private, capital side. But could you talk a little bit about the role of carbon markets? There's been a lot of conversation about Article 6 and how that's a piece of this puzzle. So, Wes?
Sure, and I think one important point that was just made was really focused on the importance of data and proving that that data is real, proving that the funds are going where they need to go. If you talk about social impact, the carbon markets have a series of methodologies that incorporate that in terms of modules or different standards. So for example, in the independent crediting standards, Verra has the CCB and the SD Vista programs that try to incorporate both biodiversity as well as social impact. And the carbon markets, I think, to the point of having a serious advantage in timelines, have a series of methodologies and best practices that we can use across, whether it's for adaptation or carbon. Now in Article 6, 6.4 is supposed to be setting the standards, but 6.2 allows countries bilateral pathways across the market. And I think it's important to think about the systems that are going to be put in place or have been put in place to both track methodological progress over time. And we can take lessons learned from the CDM to the independent crediting standards now back into 6.2, 6.4, and even other types of mechanisms, whether it's for adaptation or for other impact metrics, whether it's supply chain decarbonization or other areas. But the infrastructure we've been funding breaks that up into different pieces. So you may have heard Uganda launched a platform this COP in digital public infrastructure called Pearl Carbon, where it's pre-investment, pre-project stage ideation to project description. That's kind of one stage we need to think about. But when we get to maturity for any vehicle, any investment, we're going into a registration phase, into a description that's following methodology, that's a finance stage, cash flow ready project. But that portion of the market has been historically underdeveloped. And so we've put a lot of money into building the world's largest library of digitized and open source methodologies. We've been really blessed to work with the Secretariat back in 2023, both UN Global Innovation Hub and the Methodologies Division, and spent time helping check and approve for correctness 15 methodologies that we digitalized. Now we're working with Vera on a phase of 20 methodologies, the 20 most used methodologies in the carbon market. And we're continuing to grow this base of knowledge. But that is tied into registry systems. And those registry systems are going to be around the world. It could be national emissions registries, biodiversity registries, but in Article 6, specifically 6.2, the country registries are going to be used for domestic carbon market selling internationally through the international transfer of mitigation outcomes. We need all of these systems to work together to allow communities to go from idea stage into approved methodologies, whether they're bilaterally approved in 6.2 or internationally approved in 6.4, to get into the various registry systems, whether they're voluntary or in the international markets. And I think it's important to consider the integrity, not just in carbon credits, but all the way from the start into the finance. Because if we can't prove who's benefiting, who said what when, and what outcome, we're going to have a hard time making progress.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to thank the Hedera Foundation for being one of the DLT solution providers that really leaned into climate from the beginning. So, Nitin, I can't resist asking you about your other job. So you've got the Innovation Hub, and now you're also head of the Stakeholder Interaction Unit for 6.4. So this is sort of a, you can pick your own adventure. But it would be great to hear from you. How do you see that work fitting into this climate finance mosaic? And are there overlaps with the Innovation Hub and some of the things you might be thinking about going forward?
Thank you. It was not for me to choose that, actually. So the responsibility was given to me by the management. So I'm just fulfilling my duty. But if you look at the way Article 6 is evolving, I think there has been a lot of emphasis from the supervisory body of 6.4 on engaging more and more with the stakeholders. And stakeholders are relevant part of the, any mechanism. So I think in that way we are doing a good job by engaging more stakeholders now, especially more with those who are actually get impacted the most with the impacts of climate. Including local people and indigenous communities. So that's the emphasis that we have now. And supervisory body is putting a lot of emphasis also on having sustainable tools actually that allow these stakeholders to be part of the mechanism. Only recently, the first methodology under 6.4 was approved by the supervisory body, and that's related to the work that's happening most in Brazil on landfill capture gas LFG. So supervisory body is making progress, but we need to next year, particularly if we really want 6.4 to become the benchmark, as Wes has mentioned, for other standards to follow. We need to make more progress in terms of methodologies that should come up next year. When it comes to overlap in terms of the work, of course there is an overlap, because for innovation, you need finance. And carbon markets had proven in the past, we have seen CDM actually for last 20 years. It has proved itself as a very important tool to promote new technologies and innovation. So in all our conversation under the Innovation Hub events, we are now bringing the conversation of carbon markets and how carbon markets can be leveraged, to increase the profitability of these innovative ideas and projects. So that's how the overlap is there.
Thank you, Nitin. And Marcelo, can you speak from the perspective of a sort of in-country person? Alain's, talked about the importance of the private sector, but also what countries need to step up and do differently. And so what should,
Ask again, please.
yes, I said, when we talk about the constellation of actors that all have to do their jobs well, we taught, Alain mentioned countries have to figure out how to mobilize their resources most effectively. That probably includes a regulatory environment, a engagement with the finance sector, both inside and outside their countries. I mean, when you hear that and you're sitting here in Brazil and the work you're doing, like do you feel like you've got the the blueprint for it? Do you know what to do next? What's comes to your mind for
I
you?
think that it's just it's a permanent job, you know. Like this, every step that you move, then you have other 10 steps coming from in front of us. And I don't know. I think what Nitin was saying, and it was just before here was an Australia Pavilion, and we were talking about green steel, and then I remember about like the methane policy, public policy in Brazil, and I really believe that we need to engage subnationals, we need to engage private sector super strongly, and we cannot be standing still for like the public sector to move because the agenda doesn't have enough time to wait this. So what I've been noticed is that a lot of times when the private sector come together and engage and start to develop by itself, it, it kinds of brings the government on the boat. Because normally we have the other thing. We always think maybe the government will do, and then the private sector comes to the boat. But what I've been seeing and what I saw when I was on the government chair, and the methane is a good example because